Thank you for joining us for the second, well, actually the sixth, but the second for this year, but the sixth episode of Policy Saturday for Naija Policy Hack. Give me a sec, quickly share my screen. Our speakers are already here. Thanks to everyone that has joined us. Yeah, thanks to everyone that has joined us. For those who weren't here last time, I'll just do a quick introduction of policy shapers and of the Naija Policy Hackathon and some of the ideas that we have for the hackathon this year. I won't take much time, maybe in like 5 to 6 minutes, I'll be done. And then I'll hand over to our speakers to take it away. Thank you for everyone that's joining. You're welcome. So for those who are not familiar with us, Policy Shapers is a civic tech organization that's working to engage young people in public policy in Nigeria, even though, of course, our goal is global, but we're starting from Nigeria, and we're hoping that we'll be able to set the precedent and build a movement that can then become, something that is worthy of emulation in other parts of the world. And we think that we can do this by, finding ways to make people engage with public policy in a way that is easy for them to understand. Some part of the work that we've done to make this possible is, sorry, excuse me. So we've done the Naija Policy Hack last year, where we had close to 100 and something people who were able to join us for that weekend of policy hacking, of questioning and collaboration and everything. And we think it was a great opportunity for people who were not so familiar with the concept of public policy to just hear from speakers, right, and just listen to what the concept means. Also, we've been able to take part in, along with the team members, policy shapers, taking part in several, policy dialogues. We did a side event at the Creative Commons Global Summit. We've also done side events at UNESCO's first OER camp global, that's Open Education Resources Camp, to mention a few. And we think that by doing this, we're making it more possible and accessible for people to get part, and young people to become part of policy conversations. We've also provided policy advisory to the government of Korea, where we took part in the Open Government Partnership Program. Most of you might know us for the Reform IELTS campaign, but that's not the only thing that we do, even though that's a really successful thing and one of our pioneer programs. But yeah, through the campaign, we've been able to engage young people in public policy engagement, policy advocacy, because everything from the beginning to the end of the campaign is driven by young people. And all of the achievements so far, the policy changes we've seen in the several universities around the world have also been driven by young Nigerians. So that's one of the things that we think we're able to use to demonstrate that it's possible to be part of a policy movement. And we've contributed as well to the review of the JAM bill, which is currently on the floor of the National Assembly. And I mean, these are some of the partners we've worked with currently. We currently have an MOU with with Citizen Zikoko, who's like our media partner, who we're using to engage more people through the digital space. So we do not think of the policy hack as a one-off event. We try our best to ensure that there's sustainability built into the programs that we do, but most importantly, there's like a long-term plan, right? So in many ways, we see policies today as a chance to build our policy literacy, build our skills, and that will then prepare us to get into the policy hack for those 48 hours of virtual hacking and collaboration from August 11th to 13th. That then, there'll be winners, of course, there are prizes, there'll be winners, etc. All of those ideas that will come from the hackathon, we hope we'll be able to develop a conversation series. We have this Twitter virtual conversation series called Policy Banter, and we hope that we can use all of those ideas to lead conversation on various issues, because there are like 5 themes this year, from AI and tech, talking about the Startup Bill, Climate Change Act, all of those things. We hope that we can have conversations where young people will lead conversations in these areas. And for ideas that we think need implementation, need advocacy, we can then move from just discussing the issues to actually having a concrete advocacy plan, whether it's having a petition or engaging government ministries, etc., that actually need to have some kind of action around that. And these steps are built on our thematic areas. So we have 5 thematic areas: policy literacy, policy ideation, policy dialogue, policy advocacy, and the policy community. The community is like the collection of everybody who's working on various projects And, that's like the base for all that we do. And we hope that, this is how we're thinking about Naija Policy Hack as not just an event that is done and everyone just goes to sleep. I've already said so much about this. It's holding from Friday, August 11th to Sunday, August 13th, 2023. For those who were here during last year's hackathon, they will tell you that it was a great experience, and I can assure you that it's going to be a great experience, not just for participants, but even for us who took part. It was a great chance to just learn and listen to amazing speakers. We have amazing speakers lined up, whom we'll be announcing shortly. But yes, please do well to apply if you haven't applied. It's going to be a great experience. The application ends on July 21st because we want to have enough time to sort through applications and also reach out to those who are successful. So please do well to apply before the deadline. You can also watch, you can also relive last year's hackathon on our YouTube channel. All the videos are there, available from the welcome session to the final. Just search for Policy Shapers on YouTube, at Policy Shapers, and you find us and see all of that. Also, you can watch all of the previous Policy Saturday classes as well on YouTube. Everything is housed there from the first ever class up until last Saturday's class. And this week as well, we're going to record that. We're recording this session and it will be also housed on our YouTube channel. So please do well to go there as well and subscribe and check it out. Okay, let's go to the most important part of today's class. I'll be introducing, these guys, I don't know if they need introduction now because they're like celebrities, but I'm introducing them quickly and I'll hand over to them to take over the conversation. We'll be talking about research for policy writing, and would focus also a bit on research as it relates to how can you research quickly during a policy hack, because you have a very short time. It's a different thing when you have like a 1-year dissertation program to work on, and you're having like a long time to research. But during a short window, how are you able to research really fast and come up with very concrete data? So our speakers are founding members of Policy Shapers. We have Chimdi Chukwukere and Oluwatobi Oseni. Chimdi is so many things. For the purpose of this conversation, I would say he's a former National Security Fellow and has done a whole lot of work. He's an alumnus of the Seton Hall University, and he's done quite a bit of work. And Chimdi is really one person who is really grounded in research. From our experience as a team working on global policy hackathons, he's been able to do a lot of research for us and led us in a lot of research work. Toby is the man of so many parts. Toby is fintech, policy, education, IT, so I've known Toby for as far back as 2016 or 2015, and Toby has been working on so many things. He's a Chevening scholar, finished his program at the University of Sussex, and he's done a whole lot of programs, and I think his experience and work from WEF to UNESCO will come very, very useful in this conversation. So without further ado, I will hand over to Chimdi to take it up from here. If we have any questions, I think they'll speak for 40 minutes. If you have any questions after the conversation, we'll then be able to ask questions or make any contributions towards the end. All right, over to you guys, Chimdi.
Yes, thank you, Saiben, and welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, so welcome. So Saiben, I presume that you'll be the one helping us with the slides, right?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone. Today we'll be talking about conducting research specifically to influence policy or to write policy memo, and specifically all of this is just we are targeting towards empowering participants of the policy acting to be able to just do a quick research. One of the things that make policy briefs or memo exceptional is the quality of the evidence you present in your research. And to be able to get some of those, to get such a quality, high quality evidence, you have to know where to look for. You have to know how to look for specific information in a specific area. You have to know what information is needed that can help you develop a strong evidence for your research. So say why conduct research to influence policy? And so one of the reasons why we conduct research is to identify the gap. So you want to do a policy. So during the hackathon, you might be given option to maybe to conduct a research on climate policies or agricultural policies or something. So how do you know what to do? How do you know the topic to focus on? Will you just go and maybe start focusing on maybe energy insecurity? Do you know whether that aspect is what is really, do you know whether there's an evidence there? Do you know whether it's important? So you conduct research to identify that what has the government done? What has the government not done? What are people saying that is their pain? What are what are farmers saying is their pain from climate change? What are these people saying? So that is one reason why you conduct research before and during policy writing. You conduct research to track implementation, right? Like you get to see the one of the work that policy shapers has done so far was to help review the House of Reps JAMP bill. We helped review it, and we hope that it will be implemented. So until then, what do you do? If, let's say, there's a hackathon and you want to JAMP, the issue of JAMP irregularity is something that you want to tackle. What did you research to track whether that bill has it passed the second reading? Has it passed the third reading? Has it been implemented? So also, as I said, the main reason research helps to gather evidence. So, and when you have an evidence, it gives you a solid base for advocate. You are telling the government, because your policy brief is targeted towards someone. It's either targeted maybe towards the National Security Advisor, it's targeted towards the Minister of Agriculture, it's targeted towards someone. So how do you tell the person that there is a gap? How do you convince someone who gets a 1 page of your brief or 2 pages of your brief that, look, this is, so you have to show them tangible evidence. Through our engagement with the UK government during the Reformer IETS campaign, Eben will tell you more, and Toby will also tell you more on that. Like, you'll see that they always said, oh, we are not sure that you have more than 50% of Nigerians who can speak English. We say, what? This is the data here. This is the data. This is the number of people that pass English every year in WAEC. This is this. We had solid evidence. Then I think the last one they came with is that, oh, if you can show us that 50% of Nigerians know how to speak, no, if you can show us that, yeah, are literate or have taken the English exam or so, then they will review the policy. So on that, we are waiting for the government to conduct a census, a national census, before we go back to engage them. So, but when you know the kind of evidence that can move people to act, when research helps you identify those kind of strong evidence that can help you make people to say, oh, wow. Our engagements with universities, we just we let them know that, look, you shouldn't be requiring Nigerians to present IELTS exam. One is that this is the amount it costs. Two is that these people are qualified. Their whole education has been in English. And so when we show them this statistical evidence, and once we provide that evidence, you see that that's how we've gotten universities to change their policy. So this is why we conduct policy research, and also mostly one of the things that to build integrity, so that someone, you will not say, oh, we need this and this exists, and then people will go and ask around. They'll find out that what you said is a gap. It's nowhere to refer. There's no gap there, or you made up numbers. You made up numbers to tell a story. And when people go back, they will find out that those numbers are not true. So you don't want such a case. So these are some of the reasons of research. I don't know whether Toby wants to take this.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Chimdi. Thank you so much, Chimdi. Thank you, Eben. how do you want to approach conducting research to influence policy? And I think the first thing you really need to think of is how you want to influence policy. And what this really means is, do you want to drive innovation? Are you trying to, to achieve globalization? Are you trying to, let's say, achieve digitalization and the rest of that? And to see what exactly do you want to, how do you want to influence this? So a typical example, again, might be to maybe I'll just pick a local issue and then use it to describe this entire page. And so let's say you want to drive policy in, let's say, for climate change, one of the most important issues affecting Nigeria right now. And so how do you want to influence that? Do you want to come from an angle of food security, or do you want to come from an angle of people losing livelihood, or do you want to talk about poverty? Like, how do you want to influence that? Do you want to bring in new agricultural practices, global standard, or do you want to look at the people who are most affected and see how maybe education can, there are many ways to look around many policies. So for example, one very important approach, the World Bank's approach to poverty is addressing education. The World Bank believes that if you train a child, it means that a child can have the possibility of upward social mobility. And so how do you want to influence that? Do you want to use education as a tool to solving poverty? Do you want to use it as a tool to addressing climate change? And so that's one very important part you want to look at. So you want to consider who you need to influence and what they will be swayed by. Now, in real life, there are two scenarios here. One is for the purpose of a policy hackathon. One is in real life. In real life, when you want to write a policy, sometimes it seems like, for example, if a policy is going to tackle the same problem, let's say Nigeria and the US have similar problems, there has to be two different approaches. And why? One is because there are two different gatekeepers, for example, and also two different kind of people, two different levels of innovation, two different levels of advancement of societies. And so you need to think about the people you would influence with your policy and what you think would motivate them the most. And so, for example, there are some bad decisions that we, for example, might see government take. And some of them are because it's easier to maybe solve some of these smaller problems, than trying to solve bigger ones, because you might just fail at that. And so they create the first policy, then there's a follow-up policy, that then sorts of addresses that problem. And so who do you want to influence, and what do you think they'll be swayed by? And for you to do that, you need to use the evidence you already have. And what evidence, what do I mean by evidence that you already have? I think one key evidence that we, for example, have in a society is the fact that if you would write any really good policy, you wouldn't sit down with, let's say, Lagos, for example, and try to understand issues that, let's say, faces maybe northern Nigeria, or try to say you want to try to get this data, online or something, except when maybe you have credible sources like the World Bank and a lot of those people. So you need to conduct research itself. You need to speak with the people who will be affected by this change that you're trying to bring about. I think there are three major stakeholders in policy making. One is you, the policy writer. The most important stakeholder is the people who will be influenced by this policy. And then one stakeholder many people don't like to look at are the gatekeepers. And so what do I mean by the gatekeepers? For example, in many societies, let's look at let me look at one very interesting issue. For example, the killing of twins Mary Slessor and all of the, I think, 1974 or thereabout, and look at scenarios around that. For example, if you are going to create actual change, there are people who has made the society the way it is. There are people who hold, sort of hold the values for a society. And so if you would influence anything in that society, you need those kind of people. And so conducting research itself is in real life, it's not usually trying to maybe get data online or see what people are saying. And because until you really look at the numbers, there are many things you really do not see. And one very interesting example that I like to use all the time is when I was in Sussex, I had a conversation with a couple of my professors, and we're looking at how and why a lot of women, we were dissecting an essay that was talking about women participation in classrooms. And so one of my very interesting, friend had an opinion saying that a lot of women did not answer questions in class, or he noticed a lot of girls in Nigeria and Benin Republic did not answer questions in class because they were simply not called by the teacher. And so I try to look at what the bigger societal problem might be. And for example, look at how the fact that one in the Nigerian society, I can't speak so much about the Benin society. In the Nigerian society, the woman's voice is barely heard. In politics, for example, there are very few women you can point to. The constitution, I think that has been repealed, even remove the identity of a woman. For example, if you get married, you now have to take the identity, and you can only contest for elections in, where your husband is from. And so as a very religious society, again, many women do not lead churches, a very religious society. Many women do not lead mosques. And so it means that if you look outside the classroom, a lot of women, for example, do not have a lot of young or older people to look up to because their voices have been silenced in the entire society. And so which is why you need to do more than, you need to do research outside of what you are trying to really understand and see how does one other sector try to affect what I'm trying to do. And this also comes back to climate change, it comes back to energy. There's a whole lot of very interesting solutions that you can then try to build around if you conduct actual research. And then what's the essence of a good research if we do not analyze the data? Now, there's always going to be, I think the most important part about policymaking and your data is that there's always going to be a lot of data jumping around, but that which is why you now need to pick the most important part of it. So you, let's say, collect data for your hackathon. And some of the most important things might be to see how does this affect gender across ages? How does this affect people in urban versus rural areas, and try to analyze and compare two exact places or more than two. So you can then see, how you can create an informed decision around it. Because, for example, it might really be just a rural Nigerian problem, and a lot of Nigeria is rural, I think about 56%. But again, it's so that we don't look at things, because I believe most of the people who will be on the policy hackathon, unfortunately, are people in urban areas because of many problems that Nigeria faces. And so which is important for us to then look at, present the data in a way that it would reach and influence our target audience. Now, if I am going to look at a good policy, the first thing I want to look at is, I want to look at your data page, for example, and I want it to speak to me. And I think it's one lesson we've learned in driving the IELTS campaign. For example, we have the Home Office asking us direct questions to say, give us proof that Nigerians speak English. It's easy for you to nominally, the first time they sent that email, myself, Eben, Chimdi, and the rest of us, I think it was just a very crazy question, because why is anybody asking why a country of 200 million people who was colonized by the British, if they speak English? And because the UK government was simply saying, you need to show us evidence that Nigeria is an English-speaking country and that the vast majority of the population speak English. And we started digging into the data. We had to find, evidence. And I think one of the most important evidence we found was the pass rate for English. You cannot go into a tertiary institution in Nigeria if you do not pass English and mathematics in your WAEC. And then we went down a little bit also in your junior WAEC, you need to pass English and mathematics. And so even if, the government tries to say, or the UK government tries to say, these people do not speak English, this number of people have written WAEC, this number of people have written NECO, JAMB, and the rest of that. So it means that, these are not conventional data. You cannot simply just run a survey across the country and say, how many of you can speak English? It's not enough evidence. You need an actual evidence. What's better than evidence created by WAEC and NECO and, testing regulatory bodies themselves. And so one other important thing is you need to continue to monitor these changes. What is happening is the pass rate for WAEC, for English dropping, and so it means that, okay, maybe now there is a real problem, or maybe there isn't. Yeah, Chimdi.
Yes, thank you, Toby, for that. And so, speaking on the how do you conduct this research? So on the how of conducting research for policy writing, as we said, you have to determine, the research methodology that you want to use. Let's say you want to look at industrialization in the agricultural sector in Nigeria, or industrialization specifically in maybe in a state or in a community, or you want to. So you had to determine. Toby said something about there are some research that you can't find online. Nigeria, fortunately and unfortunately, is at a place where most of the critical data you need to influence policy, you might not find it online. I mean, if you want to really get and understand what people are going through, the pain points of people, you need to go there. you need to visit Imo State, you need to visit, Nasarawa, Castina. You need to just go there and ask people, and talk to them. But you can't do that in 48 hours of doing a policy hacking. So specifically, we are talking about policy hacking here. So you determine what do you want to do. When our first policy hacking that we did, we worked on education, impact of COVID on learning across universities in Nigeria. So we had 48 hours to do it. We won't travel. This is a Stanford hacking that we are joining online. So I'm in the US, Iben is in Port Harcourt, somebody in Abuja, I take Comfort, Ken is in Lagos. So we won't travel across Nigeria to start asking people, are you actually learning since COVID happened or something? So one of the team members, Kenny, brought up a very great idea. Why don't we conduct a survey and create a survey link, create this question and send it through university group chats online, group on Facebook, groups on WhatsApp, groups on this. And that was how we were able to collect, the evidence that we need. So you have to determine what method that you want to use and what is the most efficient method for you for the hacking. So it can involve, leveraging social media, LinkedIn, to ask questions to people. It can involve, leveraging Twitter, host Twitter spaces, because there's, in terms of research techniques, the qualitative research, which is non-numerical, which is, it deals with bringing evidence through interviews, through focus groups and through participant observations. So in that aspect, you can literally go and organize a Twitter space where you bring people to talk, right? Ask them questions, or Instagram Live, you ask them questions and they answer you, and collect that evidence, and you move on to continue with your hacking, policy hacking, or you can use, as we said, how we did ours. We use surveys through, and we leverage social media groups, Facebook groups, WhatsApp student groups. So you have to know, where can you find the people who are going through the problem that you're trying to solve? Then when you determine how you can find that, then you determine where you can find them, then you determine what is the best way possible. So if you're tackling an issue that is dealing with farmers in the rural area, there's the high unlikelihood, right, of them not being able to be using phones that are digital, that have WhatsApp. Or even if they use WhatsApp, they may not be able to click links, and to conduct a survey and submit it. So how do you reach such a people in less than 48 hours? You have to determine that. And the most way possible, maybe it can mean not focusing on the primary data, focusing on secondary data. And then you now ask yourself, how do I find those secondary data? And that's what we're going to talk about in the next slide, about how do we get this, what are the sources of secondary data? And I'll leave that for Toby.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chimdi. Okay, yes. So I think one of the most important things that has stuck with me in the last 6-7 years, working, in policy advocacy and writing policies itself, has been the fact that you cannot make up, you cannot make up your data. You cannot simply say that 5 people in my estate are poor, so it means that everybody in my local government is poor, or try to do what a lot of our politicians do, and say because a lot of people, for example, can afford to the exact word probably japa, it means that a lot of young people, are not as poor as the data seems. And so, which is why you need to use data from credible sources. Now, the first thing you need to check out if you want to use a data is to see how did they collect that data. And so if, for example, I want to use a data from policy shapers, for example, one of what I would care about would be, how did policy shapers collect this data? How did they run this survey? And that's part of what makes your data credible, because you don't want to write, you don't want to bring a solution that is not completely informed by or guided by data of the people, you know, this policy is going to affect. And so that brings us to one major source, which will be government agency websites. So in Nigeria, unfortunately, the only government agencies you might see the what's it called, data from are those who are working with the World Bank, or they have, you know, they have funded projects and the rest of that. But it still doesn't mean that when you want to really search for data, you wouldn't find them. And so, for example, some of what I do might be to optimize your keyword and say, so instead of looking for, let's say, malnutrition rates in Nigeria for 2023, you just might not see for 2023 for very obvious reasons. And then you might want to maybe remove the year from, you know, from your search and say malnutrition rates in Nigeria. And so you might see older data, which can help you do two things. So you might compare this versus birth and death rate. So if you want to see malnutrition rates and you see that this climbs by, let's say, 5% year on year, and you know, for example, Nigeria's population growth rate is 7.5% year on year. And so you can then match these things to sort of predict maybe what 2023 would look like. And so you can use this as the basis for writing your research. And then one other very important source is academic research. So I found out when I started working as a researcher that your Google Scholar, for example, should be like your google.com, for example. I mean, because you don't have access to Scopus and the rest of that for more advanced searches, Google Scholar is also quite sufficient. And this is why it is sufficient. For example, the data I've used to write papers for the University of Sussex must have come from credible sources. If not, they would not be published. The data Chimdi has used to write for, what's it called, for his academic work and also for his work in national security must have also come from credible sources. And so it sort of gives you a shoulder to lean on. And like I think Google Scholar would say, it gives you a shoulder to ride on, I think. And so that's one very important source for you to look for data. And again, when you check academic journals, you should also try to look for more recent data. Online libraries, there are quite a lot that you might have access to. I found out that one very important access you might have is when signing up for a lot of academic journals, you might want to sign up as a student. Most Nigerian universities, I'm not sure a lot of them still do it, but most Nigerian universities sort of give you a student email address. I know my university in Lautech gave me one about 10 years ago. And so you can use your student email address to sign up on a lot of these websites. It gives you access to the student platform on it, research articles from PwC, DILI, or KPMG. I mean, these are the big four. And also you might want to look at industry trend reports for energy and a lot of these other important sectors. And then the most important and the most reliable data sources usually come from the World Bank, UN.org, Relief Web, or even also any other site that is linked to the entire United Nations organization here.
So yes, as you said, we can talk or and give you strategies and ways of conducting effective research generally, but we know that we want you to be well equipped for the 48 hours hackathon that you're participating in. And the thing is that sincerely is 48 hours by name. When you start, that's when you know that it's no time runs fast, So you have to plan. How do I make sure that in 48 hours I'm able to get a very solid evidence we use to produce a very solid policy brief. So you have to think about that you have less than 36 hours, in short, not even 48, 36 hours to do this. And so start early. You have to start early when you form your team, even maybe before you guys start, before the day of the hackathon. And because one thing we'll do is that few days before the hackathon, we'll send out an email so that you know your team members and start reaching out to them and communicating and chatting. So you decide what area are we going to focus on, what topic are we going to focus on. Once you focus on this, then you delegate the tasks among your team. I remember our first hackathon, we delegated tasks. Eben handled the writing, Kenny handled research, I also handled research, I was researching on the secondary data. Kenny was handling primary data sourcing. Same with Toby. I don't know whether Toby was with us in the first. Were you with us in the first acting? I can't remember. Yeah, Comfort, Terry. Yeah, so we made sure that we divided our tasks. That's just the most important thing between the teams. So you divide the tasks. It helps when someone knows that, okay, once we start, you go and start searching. Whatever you find, bring. And as you're bringing it, someone is reading it, crunching the numbers and adding it to the brief. So that helps your work go in an easier. And as we said, then you don't have to. The population is large. If you're looking at anything you're looking at, you just have to, like we worked on students' participation in education, in learning during COVID. It would have been unrealistic given the time constraints we had. Oh, sorry, we'll get to your question. Thank you so much for the question. Given the time constraint that you have, 36 hours, 48 hours acting, it would have been unrealistic to say, oh, we are looking to get a survey data from 1 million students. So, so you have to focus on we can say, oh, if I'm able to get a response from 10 students from 10 Nigerian universities, it can help me, can give me a clue of what the bigger picture is. That is like relying on sample size. So your work is not a failed work. Your brief is not less than others if it just relies on a sample size to make your case. Then we also talk about research, curating your research, your findings. You can it's very important to find a way to be able to organize the data you gather, so there's no scattered all over the place. As I said, you only have 36 hours, so you're working. So if someone, and you have delegated your task, so if someone is working on gathering secondary data, you guys should have a place, maybe a Google Drive or a Google Drive, or your Slack channel, or dedicated Slack channel, or something, a place. You said Zotero for organizing your research references. So you have a place where you are gathering them and it's organized. It can be Excel. You can use an Excel sheet to make it make it easily accessible for other team members. So as they're gathering, someone is looking at it and taking it and doing what needs to be done. So in all, start early, plan, start early, and just stay organized. And that's for the hacking. Okay, so yeah, Toby will handle this part on sample. We'll just give you a sample.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chimdi. Okay, so this is one very interesting, research. It's cancer statistics for 2023. And if you see, for example, straight up in the abstract, I can look at this abstract and I can, place my hand on what this paper is going to talk about. I see a lot of numbers and I see a lot of comparisons. For example, it says lung cancer decreased, at half the pace of men in women. And so what's most important is that you don't want to bore anyone. Now, for your policy hackathon, for example, you're going to be different groups and you want to leave a first impression. In writing a good policy, you want to leave a first impression of two things. One is clarity and two is straightforwardness. You want me to be able to look at this policy that you've written and be able to say, oh, this approach is the best approach to addressing these problems. And one way I can determine that your approach is good is that you'd even understand the problem. You can't solve what you do not even understand in the first place. And so looking at this abstract, for example, it gives you an angle of what the problem looks like. It gives you the right statistics. It tells you how many new cancer cases are recorded every year. It shows you a growth rate. It shows you even a decline rate for people who have taken vaccines for, I think, for cervical cancer. And so it also, one important thing it shows you also is also a time frame, and shows you how this has happened since 1991 to date. And I think what's important for some of these things is that for every good policy that I have seen, and that I have seen even work, is that the people who have researched them have been able to say that this, there is a gap here, and it means that we need to be able to match that. So for example, one very key problem, for example, when we were making a recommendation for the JAMB policy, I remember was us talking about the fact that constantly JAMB has been having to drop its, its cutoff. I think it used to be 200, and now it's, I think, 140. And so if you perhaps want to, look at problems like that, you want to see what exactly is responsible for this. You probably want to talk about maybe why some universities, no longer require you to have 5 credits. And so some universities, for example, sort of take 4 credits. I know a lot of smaller private universities do that now. And so you want to look at, again, like I mentioned, and Chimdi has reiterated, you want to look at a holistic approach. You want to look at how does this thing compare to something else? It gives me, as a reader or as your assessor, I mean, I'm not your assessor, but it gives me this angle of, oh, okay, this fellow is going to be able to address this problem because they understand it. And many times it takes more than, in real life, it takes more than one policy to address a problem, because like one of my very good professors who used to be at the UN used to say, your policy life cycle should not be more than 5 years. You cannot write a long-term policy and say in maybe 5 pages you want to look at how Nigeria is going to solve unemployment. Unemployment in Nigeria is a very serious problem. And so there would be first to be a short-term solution, medium-term solution. How do we ensure more people don't even become poor, first of all, before we then talk of uplifting people out of poverty? And then how do we ensure that, that more people who are then being uplifted are not going to go back again to become poor? And so these are things that you perhaps want to look at and ensure that you're able to, to give it, again, the key word here should be an holistic approach to addressing a problem rather. So I think there's a question you want to take the answer.
Yes. So
yeah.
Thank you, Toby. As we'll just go ahead to answer the questions that we have. Please let us know if you have more questions, especially with the hacking and also with what we've discussed on conducting research. So far we have one question that say, how many pages should a policy brief be? So I will answer that. Eben can also chime in. So, but maximum, we try to from our experiences and from our learning so far, we think the policy memo should not be more than should not have more than 1,000 words. And 1,000 words, where you convert it, is probably 2 pages, 2.5 pages, or 1.5 page. So the reason is that, especially if you're writing to a government official or to someone in leadership, their time frame, their attention span is so little. They just look at, if you'll be lucky that they looked at your work. Because if an average House of Reps member comes to his office on Monday, there'll be like maybe 50 letters waiting for him from several people. So what is it that will help you that someone will be able to look at your work and immediately, even want to read it? He doesn't want to see 3 pages, for instance. It's better if it's like you're able to condense it into 1 page, but 2 pages is the best. In the first page, you have your executive summary of, this is the problem, this is the solution, this is the data, this is what we want you to do. Then in the second page, that's where you go to more into detail into, okay, this is the data, your analyzed data and your story, and your theory of change. That's where you put it in your second and third page. But let the first page contain every information, the executive summary, and every important details of action to like, this is what we wanted to do, this is the problem, this is what we saw, this is what we wanted to do, this is how you do it in your first page. So always keep in mind for this hacking, though, as I said, we have a word limit, 1,000 words for this policy hacking. But I know that most of you go beyond that and continue to do policy because it's good to help shape government policy or policy anywhere you find yourself. So always keep in mind that the people who are reading your work are busy. There's rare chance that you get to pick up that policy. So let it be that the day they pick it up, at a glance, they're able to see that, oh, this is what you're talking about. On the first page, this is what you're talking about. And this is what I can do immediately to solve it. So it doesn't have to be much. 1 or 2 pages, at most 3 pages. Yeah, but for this policy hacking, our word limit is 1,000 words. Yeah, also, Eben and Toby will also have to add on that.
Yeah, no, I think you've spoken well to it. Yeah, so 1,000 words is the word limit. And I think Chimdi's point is really clear as to why we think it should be 1,000 words. Truly, policymakers are always busy. I'm not sure why. I don't think we've been able to figure out why, but they're always working on something and they're always having meetings. And so for the short 5-10 minutes attention that you get, you want to be able to say what you want to say and give them the ideas very, very quickly. And that's why the format that we are going to share with you for the policy hackathon, gives you a breakdown where the summary comes first. So you say what the problem is, what the solution is, just very fast and say that. Then later on, you go on to break down the problem, break down the solution, and also break down your recommendation. So I think that's pretty much what I think the format is. Yeah. So any more questions? If you also have questions about research generally that Toby has worked on, Chimdi has worked on, I mean, these guys have done a lot of research work. So if you have general questions about research, feel free to do that. Also feel free to connect to them on LinkedIn. They're both on LinkedIn and they're active there. So feel free to connect to them if you have any questions thereafter. What's the time? It's 4:52. Okay, we're doing well with time. So if there's no more question, just to let us know that for those who join subsequently, registration is still on for the policy hack. Registration closes on 21st of July. We're trying to give ourselves enough time to see that we're able to reach out to everyone in time. Last year, one of the complaints that we got was that people didn't get to hear about the hackathon in time. Things were sort of rushed. So we're giving ourselves enough time to get back in touch with people. So by July 21st, we're going to close registrations. I think we have close to 200 people now. So please do well to still share this link across your social media platforms. Check on our social media platform. You also see the registration link as well. Do well to share that. Let's see how we can get people, especially people in the diaspora, right? I mean, people talk about brain drain, right? But in the Policy Shapers group, we're thinking of brain gain, and finding ways to see how we can get people who had left the country to still contribute ideas, to solutions in the country. So please do well to share this across. The hackathon itself will hold from Friday, 11th of August to Sunday, 13th of August. We have 3 defending champions from last year. We hope that they will be able to defend their title and not just win the prize, but also win bragging rights. And we also hope that new teams will also be able to put them under pressure. Next week's Policy Saturday class will be on how to write opinion editorials, or what the US calls opposite editorials, which is pretty much how to write an opinion piece about your policy idea. How do you expand more on it using the media channels, and what are the best ways to write them in a very catchy way. We're going to have me and a couple of folks will be here to contribute on the Policy Shapers team, but we also have another guest who will also join us to speak about this. So please do well to also join us next week, Saturday by 4 p.m. So if we have any,
I think
we have a question. Oh, amazing.
Yes.
Okay. Let me stop sharing.
Yes.
Okay.
So one said, I haven't seen anything that relates to what I can do. So
anything.
Yeah, so but I think I'll begin that, then I'll just give an opinion on that. Look, this is a hack team. Ask Toby and Eben and our team members, Terry, Comfort, they will speak to it. I think some of the most exciting stuff you would do is when you go into an area you don't know anything about. Yes, you're an expert in maybe energy or something, or something different in IT. But have you tried taxation before?
Yeah.
Yeah, have you tried it? Why not you try it? This is a place where there's nobody's a failure, and you have team members. So it's not, so when you come, choose an area that excites you, choose an area that is forward looking. Climate is the big thing now, and it will remain the big thing for a while. So why don't you, be adventurous enough? That's true. And that's what I have to say on that.
Very well said. Yeah, very well said. Be adventurous enough. I mean, Toby, I was describing Toby earlier. I was telling you guys that Toby codes. Toby works in fintech. Toby has done work in now policy advocacy, works in education, has done advisory to government agencies under tech. I think that it's mostly about being able to build yourself, because this is a great time for all of us in our youth. This is the best time to build your. I feel like the best policy advisors are people who have all-round knowledge, right? They're able to speak to various issues, and with development issues, problems and solutions are usually interconnected. So if you talk about unemployment, you have to talk about tech somehow. If you talk about tech, you have to talk about finances somehow. So I feel like they're all connected, and it's also a chance for us to push ourselves in an area that we may not be so comfortable with, but it's also a place for us to also learn. Yes, and Confi says issues that affect the society, maybe a policy issue in your area of interest. Yes, so we have those 5 themes for this year, and I think that this is something that we should consider. Maybe people don't know the 5 themes. Let me just quickly share. Just give me a sec. Let me just quickly share my screen to show what the 5 themes for the year are, and then we can call it wraps for today. Okay, so the 5 themes, as you see in the application form, as we go on to explain, the Nigerian Student Loan Program. This is under education, but this is a key program because we believe that it's a good idea, but has had so many challenges in other parts of the world, because like student loan programs can become a good thing and then become a bad thing. People are going into debts and are struggling, like looking for jobs and everything. So we just want to see how people can come up with solutions to this particular thing, so that we don't get into this same problem, because we think the government's at the stage where it's just at an idea phase. They're currently trying to see how they can put up the framework around implementing this particular program. The Climate Change Act, this is self-explanatory, obviously. The Climate Change Act has been signed into law, and what are the elements of the act that we think we can advocate for? And how does the act affect young people, Toby mentioned earlier, rural communities? How does it affect everyone in the country? And what particular areas do you want to highlight? We also talked about tech, AI, and the Nigerian Startup Act. We've seen a lot of people, feel themselves under this particular theme. This track as well, we look at the Startup Act that has been approved as the Startup Bill that became an act. But then what are the areas of that how does it affect education? How does it affect small businesses? How does it affect, all of that? What are those trade-offs between the various sectors? And how can these acts be useful, in so many ways? There's also agriculture and food security, which is very key. The president just declared state of emergency on our food system. So how can we ensure that Nigeria can even feed itself? Before we even talk about how we export, how can we even be sure that we can feed ourselves, locally? And then taxation and internal revenue generation, again, another hot topic, especially with the president's policies on taxes. How do we ensure that there's no multiple taxation, and that taxation itself doesn't become a deterrent to development and growth? How do you make sure the taxation works for the people, works for businesses, and that government can use this revenue that are generated, for so many positive things? So, before the hackathon starts, we'll share a tip sheet like we did last year with all the breakdown and all the questions you should think about when you're thinking about the various tracks. But these are the 5 tracks for this year. The team discussed this. We had some experts advise us, and we think these are the 5 areas that would be very useful. These are not the only problems in Nigeria, obviously. We had 4 themes last year. Those are not the only problems in Nigeria, but we think that these are areas that, as young people, these are like pathways we can easily get into and have the most impact and start conversations on these particular issues. Yeah.
So there's a question for you, Eben, I think. Say, can it be ideal to have a civil society policy engagement training? I
It will
guess.
be ideal. I mean, Toby, do you want to answer that? Of course, it's going to be ideal to have.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very ideal, to have civil society engagement training, especially because the most people, I mean, some of the most what's it called, impactful projects we've seen in the last maybe decade, has been by civil society organizations. So if you ask me, I'm probably biased, because of my work, but I think that CSOs are, one of the most impactful people in society. And I think, yes, it would be ideal, to do that. So you might want to, reach out to Iben, let's see, what we can work on. And also maybe in your own, small community, you can try to make a difference, if you're, for example, if you're a copper or whether you're not, get a few young people together. And then, everybody, for example, wants to listen to a copper because our system is credentialized, and a copper means you have a degree or something. And so you can get these young people to teach other younger people on stuff. You can let them look at, for example, how policies affect our lives. Is beyond just a bottle, but to see why, we should protect, community projects and also follow up, and not just leave governments to try to, work it around things. So yes, I believe this is one very interesting thing here.
Amazing. So thank you so much for asking that question, Roland. As Toby said, this is something that we're definitely happy to speak with you about. And of course, it's part of the plans for our policy literacy program to reach out to many also youth-led organizations, who are working in this space, and also see how to pass knowledge down there. But again, all of this information is available on our YouTube channel. So just in our closing words, go to our YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll find all the policy Saturday classes. Yeah, I can see Ken saying she agrees with comforts. Ken, they agree with comforts on the effects of tax policy. Yeah. Amazing. All right, so we're very time conscious. Chimdi, Toby, any final words? We'll wrap it up here.
I mean, we look forward to the hackathon. I, for one, look forward to for you joining the hackathon, and try to send it across to more young people in your communities. Also, because it's your way of also letting them understand how they can participate in governance, and also for us to be able to do better as young people in a country that is a very interesting paradox of everything. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
I agree with Toby. Please share this in your school WhatsApp group. Your Facebook, LinkedIn pages, share it, tell people to join. We are giving data, we are giving you free data to participate in the Hackthon. Every participant will have let me not make mistake over promise, but let's say 2,000, right? Or 5,000 worth of data, I don't know, to participate. So tell them that you have free data that we are giving out. The cash prize is plenty. So please, we look forward to having you.
Thank you. Chimdi doesn't want to be like a Nigerian politician that over promises and under delivers. All right, thank you so much, guys. Thanks a lot for joining in. Hope we see you next week. We're talking about opinion editorials and advocacy using writing. Thank you for joining. The video from the session will be uploaded maybe the next 1 hour or so. So you can also find us once you register and subscribe on our YouTube channel. All right, thank you so much, Toby and Chimdi, for the session, and
thank you, everyone.
see you next week, everyone.
Thank you for having us, everyone. Cheers. Yeah.